Hi guys, in this video we're going to make the Barbarian King from Clash of Clans. So I've got a picture of him and I'm going to make him in modelling paste. So I've dyed some modelling paste in a skin tone, so I'm just using the Sugar Flare one. I'll put links below the video in the description box to everything that I use. So I've got that dyed, I'm just going to put it in a bag to one side so it doesn't dry out. And then I've also dyed a grey, so we're going to roll that into a long sausage shape and kind of flatten it just a little bit. And then with your fingers, try and get a ridge in the centre. And then we're going to try and make the edges a little bit uneven and squish down the end. This is going to be his sword. So I'm going to trim that to length. And I'm just going to put a couple of indentations in. And then using a little bit more of the grey, we're going to roll a little handle for the sword. So just small like that. I'm going to dye a little bit more in honey gold. And apologies, this is where I accidentally turned the camera off record thinking I'd pressed it on. So I just rolled a little circle for the very top and kind of squished it into a bit of a hexagon shape. And then the bit that kind of goes in the middle was just a bit of a sausage shape. And I just cut either end off to square it off a little bit and then put them all together. And for extra support, I added a cocktail stick into the centre. You don't have to do this. You can just give it longer to dry than I have done. But because I was in a bit of a rush when I was making it, I thought it would give it a bit of extra support. You could also use a piece of spaghetti as well if you prefer. Back to the flesh colour that we made earlier. I'm going to start by making his body. So I'm going to create a bit of a rectangle, slightly rectangle. It's quite rounded at the ends. I'll just flatten them off a little bit. And I'm going to trim this because he's only got quite a short body. And then just using a modelling tool, I'm going to put some indentations in for his chest. So can you see just a curved line kind of going part way up the body, and then we'll put a little line in the middle of the chest. Then I'm going to move on to the legs. So I've got quite chunky legs, roll some sausage shapes, and then we're going to bend in a foot and we'll trim them off, again only quite short, and I'm going to kind of point them a little bit at the knee and then put some slight imprints in with my modelling tool again where the toes are, and just do exactly the same for the second leg. And now I've dyed a little bit of brown and we're just going to make him some sandals with these. So a bit of an oval shape that's flattened down a little bit and just pushed onto the bottom of each foot. Then with some more brown, roll a thin strip and you can cut this so that it just fits across the top piece of his foot, joining onto the bottom brown bit that you've just added. Now I've got some of the honey gold that I dyed earlier and I'm mixing it with a little bit of the brown. And then we're going to stick his legs on. Now I've just used water, but you can use glue, edible glue. And then we're going to cut a strip of this honey gold and brown for his skirt, if it's called a skirt. So I've put two little V's in it, which will be the sides, and wrap that round. Give it a good stick down and trim it off. So taking a thin strip of the brown, we're going to put this round his middle as the belt. Trim that off at the side. Just give it a bit of a rub down where the join is. And then back to your honey gold. I'm going to roll quite a long thin piece and we're going to put this round for the belt buckle. So just wrap that round into almost a square shape, and then taking a tiny little piece, put that in the centre for the middle of the belt buckle. And now this time we're going to use red and we're going to cut some strips like we did for the belt. But this time it's going to wrap diagonally around the body, and then we're going to take another strip. It's going to come from the centre of that one around, and it's just going to meet in the same place at the back. And I'm going to cut a little square, quite flat, out of the honey gold, and that's just going to go in the middle of those red straps. And in the middle of that, we're going to put a small ball of the honey gold, like so. Now for the head, I'm going to start with an oval. I've kind of pressed underneath, so he's got a bit of an angle under his chin. So I'm just going to mark in with a knife where I want his mouth to go, and then underneath it, I'm going to try and create a bottom lip. So I'm just pushing in my cocktail stick, and then I'm going to go over it with my modelling tool, and I'm just pressing again under his chin, kind of at the back of the head, and pushing in more of a dint so that his head will sit better on the body. So I'm just working out where I want his eyes to go. So they're about halfway down his head, and I'm just poking holes with the cocktail stick where I think his eyes are going to go. I might move these around slightly once I've got a bit more detailing done. Just push his eye sockets upwards just a little bit. And then we're going to take a ball for the nose and we're going to push it on. When you push it, try and create more of a triangle. And then we're going to poke in two nostrils. It's actually easier with the cocktail stick for this bit. Now back to our honey gold again, and we're going to roll a long thin strip, which is going to become his moustache. Just make sure it's thin enough that it doesn't cover his bottom lip. So place that under the nose, and then the bit of chin that's poking out, I'm just going to add some black edible dust to his chin, and then we're going to shape round the moustache so it comes to the bottom of his chin. Then we're going to take it back round up his head to create his sideburns, and then it's going to come back round to his eyebrows. And I'm just going to open up the eye sockets again because I've squidged them a little bit. I've squished them just a little bit, closing them up a bit. And I've just got some red edible dusts for his nose and cheeks, and just a tiny bit on his bottom lip as well. We'll give him some ears now. So 2 balls of the flesh colour, put them in place on the side of the head, and then just push your paintbrush handle into the centre. Then for the eyes, we want 2 ovals of white modelling paste, and just push those in place. Now I've kind of straightened the bottom bits off just a slight bit. For the eyes, I've got a sky blue that I'm just painting into the centre, and then once you've got a circle in the middle of each eye, you can then add a tiny piece of black modelling paste or fondant, or if you prefer you can paint it in. And then I'm going to go even smaller with a piece of white, and we're going to add this into each eye. So it's only tiny. I think I might have got it slightly out of focus. So now I'm going to give him some hair for the very top of his head. So I've just created a little circle of the same colour that we've used for his moustache. Now don't worry about the line, because when we do him a crown it's going to cover up that line between the top of his head and his eyebrows. So I'm pushing his head onto his body with a cocktail stick, and I'm just using some water to secure it in place. Now I've gone back to my grey that I had left from the sword, and I've rolled a long thin strip for the crown, and then what I'm going to do is, using a square cutter, I'm cutting some pieces out to create the crown shape, and then we're going to stick that around his head, making sure it covers the edge of the top piece of hair that you've added. And then we'll just add some tiny dots or balls of the grey around the edge of that crown. Now for the arms, because he's got quite big arms, I am going to put in some extra support. So I'm going to put the cocktail sticks in at the angles I want them to go. If they're a bit long, snap a little bit off the end. The cocktail sticks do mean that you can't eat the character unless you remove them first. So just do the same for the other arm, positioning it in the angle you want it to go in. And now I'm going to work on the back of his hair. So I've just rolled a piece of the hair colour again. I've concertinaed it up a little bit at the bottom, and I'm just trimming it down so it's not too long. And I've just kind of pinched the edges, or the edge corners a little bit, so that they'll kind of tuck above his ears. Okay, so that's the hair on. So one arm is going to be holding his sword, so I'll just work out how tall the sword is compared to the arm or the body. So I'm starting with quite a thick piece, and I've rolled it into a sausage shape, angled the top so that it will fit nicely against the body, and then we've just put a little dint in where the elbow would go, and I'm just going to trim a little bit more off the top of the body there. I'm not worried about hand too much on this because we're going to add that separately on this arm, and just give it a good push on so that you know it's not going to fall off. We're just going to do the same for the second arm, only this time we're going to add the elbow, bend the arm, and then we're going to add another dint where the hand's going to go, or where the wrist is going to go. I'm going to cut in a thumb into that hand. So I'm just going to put in a couple of slits for his fingers. And you can see on the picture, he's just got 3 fingers and the thumb. So I'm going to push that onto the cocktail stick and bend that round a little bit. Just check my sword fits nicely in his hand. And then we're going to work on the hand for the other side. I've got more of an oval shape to start with, and I'm putting a slit in for the thumb. And then again, we're going to put our 2 little cuts in to create more fingers. Trim off that extra bit. And we're just going to bend those fingers round a little bit so that it's creating a fist. We're going to add some little lines. I'm just using the back of the knife for this. And that should just attach to the end of the hand. Then I've rolled a long thin strip that's going to go now around the wrist. Put that around so it connects with the hand that you've just put on. Comes from the top of that. Then we'll cut a little rectangle that's going to go on the top of the hand. And then a little one that's just going to go above that. And now I'm going to roll some little cones. Tiny, tiny little cones. So it looks like he's got spikes coming out the back of his hand. Okay, now his hand wants to move about a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just put some pins into the leg under the hand, supporting it until it dries. Then when he's dried, I'll remove those pins. And now for the bit that goes on his shoulder, we've just got some more of the grey. Create a bit of an oval, give it a squash, and then what I'm going to do is, using my modelling tool, I'm just going to put a dint around just short of the edge, so that once you've gone all the way around, it just leaves a ridge. Get plenty of water on that, and then we're just going to fold that over his shoulder. Don't push it too tight to his shoulder, you want it to stand out a little bit. And we want one big cone to create a spike coming out of that. Then I'm going to stand him up and place the sword in his hand like that. Just stick it down with a bit of water, and then I realised I hadn't quite finished him before I put him in place on the cake and forgot his little wristband. So back to my brown, I've rolled a thin strip and I've cut a piece out that's just going to fit around his wrist. And then with the grey, we're going to create some more little cone shapes, again creating little spikes that are going to go around his wrist. And just to keep him up balanced, I've created some bits of grass just in some fondant that I'm just going to push behind him, just to make sure that he doesn't fall backwards. And here's a picture of him completely finished in place against his cake. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching.
If you liked this video and would like to see more, please click on the images of the other videos suggested. Also, please do subscribe to my channel using the button at the bottom right hand corner of the screen. You can also visit my cake website and my Facebook page to see more cakes and ideas.